Good morning, and welcome to today's story, a touching, humane, and educational tale.
The night the river came for her home, 18-year-old Sadie Rowan realized childhood was over. In this story, you'll see how courage can grow in the middle of fear, how love can turn an ordinary girl into a protector, and how even after terrible loss, people can still build hope from what the world leaves behind. The rain had been falling for 3 straight days over Marlow, Louisiana. Not a soft spring rain, not the kind that tapped politely on a roof and drifted away by morning. This rain came down hard, cold, and merciless, like the sky had split open and forgotten how to close. By late afternoon, the streets near the river no longer looked like streets at all. They looked like muddy channels, brown water sliding over curbs, swallowing mailboxes, crawling up porches, dragging tree branches and trash cans along with it. Sadie Rowan stood barefoot in the living room of the little shotgun house she had shared with her father and younger brother, Benji, and stared at the water spilling under the front door. For one frozen second, she could not move. She was only 18. 18 and already far too familiar with losing things. Her mother had died the previous spring after a long fight with heart failure. Her father, a welder with calloused hands and a laugh that used to fill every room in the house, had died 6 months later in an accident at the plant outside town. After that, everything in Sadie's life had turned practical. Bills, forms, school calls, cheap groceries, keeping Benji fed, keeping Benji calm, keeping Benji from asking too many questions at night when the house got quiet and grief started breathing in the corners. Now the river was taking what little they had left. Sadie? Benji's voice shook behind her. She turned fast. Her little brother stood in the hallway clutching his backpack with both hands, his small face pale, his blonde hair stuck to his forehead from sweat and damp air. He was only 9, but in that moment he looked even younger. "The water's in my room," he whispered. Sadie crossed the room in 2 steps and knelt in front of him. "It's okay," she said, though her own voice sounded thinner than she wanted. "We're leaving right now." She had packed the backpack an hour earlier when the weather radio started using words like catastrophic and mandatory evacuation, 2 bottles of water, peanut butter crackers, Benji's inhaler, a flashlight, a dry t-shirt, their father's old pocket knife, and the envelope, the one with the last of the cash. Not much, just enough to remind her how close they always were to having nothing. She pulled her boots on without socks, grabbed the backpack, and took Benji's hand. The porch steps were already underwater. The cold hit her first. It was sharp and shocking, rising around her calves as she stepped off into the street. Benji gasped and clung tighter to her arm. The rain lashed sideways in the wind, needling her face, soaking her hair to her scalp. Across the street, a neighbor was trying to lift a dog into the back of a pickup truck. Farther down, somebody was shouting for their mother. A car alarm wailed and then died under the water. Sadie swallowed hard. "Don't let go," she told Benji. "I won't." She believed him. It was herself she wasn't sure about. They moved slowly, feeling for the pavement with every step. The current was stronger than it looked, tugging hard against her knees. She kept her body angled toward Benji, shielding him from floating debris and the worst of the wind. The church shelter on high ground was only 6 blocks away. That was the plan. That had been the plan all afternoon. But when they reached Jefferson Street, a sheriff's truck was blocking the road, lights flashing red through the rain. A deputy leaned out and shouted over the storm. "Shelter's full. Bus routes shut down. Head north if you can." North. As if that meant anything in a town disappearing underwater. Sadie stood there for half a second, drenched and shivering, trying to think, trying not to let Benji feel the panic rising in her chest. Then she saw it. Out beyond the flooded bait shop and the warped old dock, half hidden in reeds and river trash, was the shape of something large and dark tilted near the bank. A boat, not a fishing boat, not a barge, something longer, heavier. Its paint was peeled nearly to the metal. One side of it leaned toward the river like a tired old animal, too stubborn to die. Across the side, barely visible through mud and rain, faded letters clung to the hull. Marlow County Floating Library. Benji looked where she was staring. "Is that a boat with books?" Sadie almost laughed. The sound that came out was closer to a broken breath. Years ago, she remembered hearing about that library boat, some county project. Something cheerful people talked about before the funding dried up and the town forgot it existed. Now it sat stranded in floodwater like the ghost of a better idea. Sadie looked back at the road. No buses, no room at the shelter, no safe porch. No one coming to save them. She squeezed Benji's hand. That, she said, her voice low and steady now, is where we're going. They fought their way down toward the dock through brush, mud, and icy water. By the time they reached the boat, Sadie's legs were trembling from cold and strain. The side access door was chained shut, rust staining the metal around it. She searched the flooded ground, found a broken chunk of concrete, and slammed it against the narrow window beside the door. Once, twice. The glass shattered inward. Benji flinched. Sadie cleared the jagged edge with her sleeve, ignoring the sting as it sliced her wrist. "Climb through," she said. "What does sir? What about you?" "I'm right behind you." Benji crawled in first. Sadie hauled herself after him, landing hard on a damp floor in the dark. For a moment, they just sat there, breathing. Rain hammered the roof above them. The river knocked softly against the hull, and somewhere in the darkness around them, shelves full of forgotten books waited in silence. Sadie pulled Benji close, both of them shaking, both of them soaked to the bone. But they were out of the water. For tonight, that was enough, and neither of them knew it yet. But the town had forgotten this boat for a reason. The inside of the old library boat smelled like river mud, mildew, and paper that had been left alone too long. Sadie stayed still for a moment, one arm wrapped around Benji, her chest rising and falling hard as she listened to the storm outside. Rain battered the roof in heavy, relentless bursts. The hull groaned now and then, a deep wooden complaint that made the whole boat feel alive in a tired, uneasy way. But it was holding. That mattered. For the first time since the water had pushed through their front door, Sadie felt something besides panic. Not relief. Not yet. Just a thin, fragile sense that maybe the night would not swallow them whole. Benji shivered against her. "Is it safe?" he whispered. Sadie looked into the dark. Rows of shelves stood in crooked shadows. Some had tipped sideways. Some were still upright, packed with swollen books and plastic bins. A few children's posters clung to the walls, their corners curled from old damp air. Near the far end of the room sat a worn reading rug with faded stars on it, and beside it, a little wooden chair painted bright blue long ago. The place looked forgotten, but not ruined. "Safer than outside," she said softly. That was enough for Benji. It had to be enough for her too. She found the flashlight in the backpack and clicked it on. The beam cut through the dark, catching dust, water stains, and long shelves labeled with peeling stickers. History, science, picture books, local archives. The words felt almost strange in a night like this. Sadie pushed herself to her feet, boots squishing against the damp floor. "Stay close," she told Benji. Together they moved deeper into the boat. The main reading room was longer than it looked from outside. Built-in shelves lined both walls, and narrow windows sat high enough to keep out most of the rain. Toward the back, she found a small office with a desk bolted to the floor, a cracked coffee mug, and an old county calendar still hanging on the wall from more than 10 years ago. Beyond that was a compact little galley space with a sink, rusted cabinets, and a squat oil heater bolted near the corner. Sadie stopped there. That heater might as well have been treasure. She crouched beside it, running the flashlight over the metal body, the fuel line, the dusty control knob. She had spent enough years watching her father fix broken things to know the difference between dead and neglected. This was neglected. There was a chance. Benji hovered near the doorway, hugging himself. "You think we can stay here?" Sadie looked around again. At the narrow walls, at the shelves, at the floor that was ugly but dry, at the little office that could become a sleeping corner if she cleared it out. It was not home. It was not even close. But it was shelter. "For tonight," she said. Then after a beat, more honestly, "Maybe longer if we're careful." Benji nodded, and in that tiny nod, she saw exactly how badly he needed her to sound sure. So Sadie got busy. She always did better once there was something to do. She cleared a patch of floor near the back office and dragged over 2 beanbag chairs that had hardened with age but were still better than bare boards. She found a stack of children's blankets in a plastic storage tote, a little musty but dry enough underneath, and shook them out. Then she used an old pushcart to move fallen books away from the hallway so they would not trip in the dark. Benji, seeing her work, began helping without being asked. He stacked paperback books in neat piles. He lined up canned juice boxes someone had left behind years ago on the desk like they were precious supplies. He found a basket of stuffed reading buddies in the children's corner and chose a floppy-eared dog with one button eye missing. By the time Sadie came back from checking the side windows, Benji was sitting cross-legged under a blanket with the toy in his lap and a picture book open under the flashlight beam. For one aching second, the sight of him nearly undid her. He looked so small, too small for floodwater, too small for funeral clothes, too small for all the things the world had already asked him to survive. Sadie turned away and swallowed the burn in her throat. No, not now. She still had work to do. The heater came first. She knelt beside it again, twisting the fuel cap loose. Empty. Of course it was empty. Still, when she tested the line and cleaned the vent with the tip of her father's old pocket knife, the thing did not fall apart in her hands. That was something. She searched the cabinets and found cleaning rags, a box of wooden matches sealed in a zip bag, and 2 unopened bottles of lamp oil shoved in the very back behind a stack of county brochures. Sadie stared at them in disbelief. Then she laughed. It came out soft and shaky, but it was real. Benji looked up. What? We just got lucky, she said. Very carefully, she filled the heater reservoir, wiped down the metal, and turned the knob the way she remembered her father doing back home during cold snaps. She struck a match. The tiny flame trembled, then caught. A low orange glow bloomed behind the heater grate. Warmth did not flood the room all at once. It arrived slowly, gently, like something cautious that did not yet trust them either. But it came. Benji scooted closer with his blanket wrapped around his shoulders. Sadie sat beside him on the floor, both of them holding their hands out toward that small, stubborn heat. Outside, the river still raged. The town was still drowning. They still had no plan for tomorrow, no food beyond crackers, and no idea what would happen when the water went down. But inside that abandoned floating library, under shelves full of forgotten stories, a little warmth began to gather around them. And for the first time in a long while, Sadie did not feel like the world had ended. It felt instead like the beginning of something she did not yet understand. By morning, the storm had not ended. It had only changed its voice. The hard pounding rain from the night before had softened into a steady gray drizzle. But the river was still high, still swollen, still moving with a dark, muscular force that made the whole world outside the windows feel unstable. Sadie woke on the floor of the back office with a crick in her neck and one hand still curled around the flashlight. For half a second, she did not know where she was. Then she heard the low hum of the oil heater, the soft rustle of pages turning, and Benji's sleepy little cough from the corner. Memory came back all at once. The flood, the broken window, the boat. She sat up fast. Benji was awake, wrapped in 2 faded library blankets, sitting cross-legged near the children's shelves with that one-eyed stuffed dog propped beside him. He had a picture atlas open in his lap and was tracing the shape of Texas with one finger, like the world on the page was somehow steadier than the one outside. "You scared me," Sadie said, rubbing her eyes. Benji looked up. "You were asleep." "I know that. You look tired." That almost made her smile. "Thanks," she murmured. "Very flattering." The heater was still going, though the little flame had burned lower. The room held a thin, patchy warmth now, enough to take the bite off the damp air. Outside the narrow windows, muddy water stretched farther than she wanted to see. A stop sign stuck out of it at an angle. So did the roof of somebody's shed. Their town looked less like a place people lived and more like the leftover pieces of one. Sadie stood and checked their supplies. 2 bottles of water, half a pack of crackers, Benji's inhaler, 1 flashlight. Not enough. Not even close. "We've got to find more food today," she said. Benji closed the atlas carefully, like it mattered. "Do we have to go back outside?" Sadie looked toward the window. Every instinct in her wanted to say no. To lock the door. To keep what little safety they had managed to build. But safety, she was learning, was expensive. And it rarely stayed still for long. "Maybe not far," she said. "Just enough to see what's still here." She found an old yellow rain slicker hanging on a hook near the office door, probably left behind years ago by some county volunteer. It was too big for her, but that did not matter. She pulled it on, rolled the sleeves, and told Benji not to open the side door for anybody unless he heard her voice. That made him nervous immediately. Sadie saw it in his face, so she knelt in front of him and softened her tone. "I'm not leaving you for long. 10 minutes, maybe 15. Benji clutched the stuffed dog tighter. "What if the boat floats away?" "It won't." "What if the water comes in? Then you climb up on the desk and yell at me later for being wrong." That earned her a tiny smile. It was enough. She stepped outside onto the narrow side deck, and the cold morning air hit her like wet metal. Everything smelled like mud, diesel, and wet wood. The old dock was barely visible now, half underwater and listing sideways. Flood debris had gathered against the hull during the night. Plastic crates, broken branches, a red gas can with no cap. A lawn chair turned upside down like it had simply given up. Sadie moved carefully, one hand on the rail. That was when she heard it. A voice. "Easy there." She spun around so fast she nearly slipped. An older woman in a flat-bottomed aluminum boat was easing through the water toward the library, pushing with a long pole. She wore a faded denim jacket under a green rain poncho, and her silver hair was braided tightly down her back. Her face was lined and sharp, the kind of face that looked like it had seen a lot and had no patience for foolishness. "I'm not here to cause trouble," the woman called, "though I'll admit I did not expect to find anybody living on this old thing." Sadie did not answer at first. She just stood there wary, cold, and ready to run back inside if she had to. The woman studied her for one long second. Then her eyes shifted past Sadie to the broken window. "To be fair," she said, "I suppose if the river tried to kill me, I might break into a library too." Sadie let out a breath she had not meant to release. The woman guided the little boat closer and tied off to a crooked post. "My name's Evelyn Marsh," she said. "Used to run the town library before the county shut the branch down and forgot this boat existed." She reached behind her seat and lifted a canvas bag. "I brought canned soup, bottled water, peanut butter, and a loaf of bread that is not fresh enough for company but too fresh to throw away." Sadie stared at the bag. For a moment she could not speak. "Why?" she asked finally. Evelyn gave her a look that was half stern, half wounded. "Because I'm 70 years old, child, not dead." Something in that answer landed deep. No speeches, no pity, just simple human decency. Sadie helped her aboard. Inside, Benji froze at the sight of a stranger, then lit up when Evelyn pulled an orange from her coat pocket like a magician revealing treasure. She gave it to him without ceremony, then slowly turned in the center of the reading room, taking in the blankets, the moved carts, the burning heater, the stacked books. "Well," she said softly. Her voice had changed. It was no longer dry. It was touched with something older, something tender. "You brought her back to life." Sadie followed her gaze. "Her?" Evelyn rested one hand on the nearest shelf. "This boat, we used to call her the Magnolia Run," she smiled faintly. Children would wait on the riverbank every other Thursday in the summer just to see her coming. Benji stepped closer, orange in hand. "It was a library boat for real?" "It surely was." Evelyn's eyes warmed. "Books, story hour, lemonade in paper cups, the whole thing." For the first time since the flood began, the room felt like more than a hiding place. It felt like it had belonged to people once. Good people. People who had laughed here, learned here, been safe here. Sadie looked around differently now. At the shelves, at the little blue chair, at the faded rug with stars. And for the first time, she let herself imagine something dangerous. Not just surviving here, staying. Then Evelyn's eyes moved toward the far wall near the old circulation desk. Her expression changed. The color in her face faded just a little. "What is it?" Sadie asked. Evelyn did not answer right away. She stepped closer to the wall where the original painted county emblem was still barely visible beneath water stains and time. Then she looked back at Sadie. "There are some places," she said carefully, "a town does not forget by accident." Outside, the river rolled past in heavy silence. Inside, under the dim light and the smell of soup beginning to warm on the heater, Sadie felt something shift. The boat was still shelter, still hope, but now it was also a question. And somewhere inside that question, she could feel the beginning of trouble. Evelyn's words stayed with Sadie the rest of the day. "There are some places a town does not forget by accident." The sentence settled into the room like smoke. Not loud, not dramatic, just there. Benji felt it too, even if he did not fully understand it. He stayed quieter than usual after lunch, sitting near the children's shelf with his orange peels folded neatly in a napkin, flipping through an old book about river animals while the heater ticked softly beside him. Outside, the floodwater still stretched wide and brown beneath a low iron sky. Inside, the boat felt smaller now, not because the walls had changed, but because the silence had. Sadie spent the afternoon doing what she always did when life started pressing in too hard. She cleaned. She wiped down the little galley counter with an old library rag. She stacked loose paperbacks into neat piles. She pushed a fallen cart back against the wall. She checked the side windows twice, then 3 times. Evelyn watched all of it from the office doorway, one hand wrapped around a chipped mug of soup as if she had seen that kind of nervous busyness before. She used to do that too, Evelyn said at last. Sadie looked up. Who? The last woman who ran this boat. Evelyn stepped into the reading room slowly, like every floorboard remembered her. Her name was Miriam Vale. She was the county librarian when this place was still alive. Bright woman, steady, kind, the sort that could calm a room full of children with one look and shame 3 city officials with one sentence. Benji glanced up from his book. Sadie leaned against the circulation desk. Ma, what happened to her? Evelyn's face changed in a way Sadie had already begun to recognize. Not fear exactly. Something older than fear. Something tired. She disappeared, Evelyn said quietly. About 18 years ago. Not long after the second big flood. Sadie frowned. Disappeared how? That depends on who you ask. Evelyn stared out one of the high windows at the slow churn of the river beyond the glass. Officially, folks said she left, took a bus out of town, started over somewhere. Unofficially, she paused. Unofficially, there were people who never believed that for a second. The boat creaked under them. Benji closed his book. Sadie crossed her arms. Why would people think she didn't leave? Evelyn looked toward the far wall near the old circulation desk. Because right before she vanished, Miriam started asking the wrong questions. Sadie felt the air in the room shift again. About the flood, she thought. About this boat. About something nobody wanted touched. Evelyn set down her mug and walked to the desk. She ran her fingers across the wood grain, over old scratches and a faded ink stain. That flood 18 years ago was supposed to be a once-in-a-generation disaster. That's what they told people. Act of God. Bad luck. Too much rain. Her mouth tightened. But Miriam thought the damage made no sense. Certain levee reports had been changed. Repair requests never got filed. Money went missing. Families on the poor end of town got hit hardest, and somehow nobody at the county office ever had a satisfying answer why. Sadie looked at Benji. He was listening now with wide, serious eyes. She lowered her voice. You think she found something? I think she believes she did. Evelyn moved behind the circulation desk, then crouched and opened a warped cabinet door near the floor. Inside were old route maps, moldy craft paper, and a bundle of cracked plastic sign holders. Nothing unusual. Still, she kept searching. She used to keep notes, Evelyn murmured. Always said paper remembers what people try to bury. Sadie came around the other side and knelt beside her. Together they pulled out more forgotten things. A box of overdue slips, a broken stapler, a sealed jar of crayons turned to waxy lumps in the heat years ago. Then Benji, who had drifted over without either of them noticing, pointed toward the back panel of the cabinet. That board's different. Sadie squinted. He was right. One narrow section of wood was smoother than the rest. Cleaner, too, in a way that made no sense under all that dust. Sadie wedged her fingernails into the edge and tugged. Nothing. She grabbed the old pocket knife from her back pocket, slipped the blade into the seam, and pried harder. The panel popped loose with a dry wooden snap. Behind it sat a shallow hidden compartment. Inside was a dented blue tin box, the kind people once kept recipe cards or family letters in. For 1 second, no one moved. Even Benji seemed to understand this was the kind of moment that changed what came next. Sadie lifted the box out carefully and set it on the desk. The metal latch was rusted but not locked. When she opened it, the smell of old paper rose up at once. Inside were letters, dozens of them, some tied with faded string, some folded loose, and beneath them, a handwritten list of names on yellow legal paper. Evelyn stared down at the page and the color drained from her face. "Oh my lord," she whispered. "What is it?" Sadie asked. Evelyn's hand trembled as she touched one of the names. "These are families from the south side." Her voice thinned. "Families that lost homes in that flood. Families who were told nobody could have seen it coming." Sadie unfolded the top letter. The paper was brittle but readable. At the bottom of the page, in firm, careful handwriting, was a signature. Miriam Vale. Sadie read the first line silently and her heartbeat changed. This was no diary, no sentimental memory box. It was evidence, a record, a warning somebody had hidden and never come back for. Benji looked from Sadie to Evelyn. "Is it bad?" Sadie did not answer right away. She was still staring at the page in her hands. Outside, the river knocked against the hull with a slow, patient force. Inside, the heater ticked. The old shelves stood quiet around them. And just like that, the boat was no longer only a shelter from the flood. It had become the place where the truth had been left behind. Sadie did not sleep that night. She sat at the old circulation desk with Miriam Vale's letters spread carefully in front of her. the oil heater breathing out its small, faithful warmth, while Benji slept in the back office with the one-eyed stuffed dog tucked under his arm. Evelyn stayed too. Neither woman said much. They did not need to. The truth was heavy enough on its own. By dawn, Sadie had read enough to understand the shape of it. 18 years earlier, county money meant to reinforce the levee along the south side had been siphoned off through false invoices and shell contracts. Miriam had copied names, dates, payment records, and handwritten notes from town meetings before the originals disappeared. She had written letter after letter trying to get someone outside Marlowe to listen. Then she vanished, and the people who had suffered most were the ones with the least power to fight back. Families on the poor side of town. Families like the ones still getting washed aside first. Sadie sat back in the chair and pressed both hands against her face. She was only 18. She had no lawyer, no car, no real home anymore. No room in her life for a fight this big. But when she looked toward the office and saw Benji asleep beneath library blankets, something in her hardened into place. This was exactly why people like Wade Harlan always won. Because ordinary people were too exhausted to keep standing. Around 8 that morning, the sound of an engine carried over the water. Sadie moved to the side window and looked out. A county workboat was pushing through the floodwater toward the dock. 2 men in orange rain gear stood on the bow. Behind them, in a clean tan jacket that looked too expensive for a flood zone, stood Wade Harlan himself. Even from a distance, he looked polished, comfortable. Like a man arriving for a photo opportunity instead of a demolition. Evelyn came up beside Sadie and went pale. "He came himself," she whispered. "That means he knows." Sadie folded the letters back into the tin box. "No," she said quietly. "It means he's afraid." By the time Wade stepped onto the dock, Sadie was already outside waiting for him. The rain had finally stopped, but the sky still hung low and cold over the river. Mud clung to the railings. Driftwood knocked against the hull. Wade glanced at Sadie, then up at the faded lettering on the boat, and smiled the kind of smile that never reached a man's eyes. "You must be the girl folks are talking about," he said. "I'm here on behalf of county safety. This structure is unstable. We're towing it out by noon." Sadie stood straighter. "Funny," she said. "Seems like the boat held up better than your levee did." For the first time, his expression flickered. Just for a second. Then it was gone. "I don't know what you think you found in there," he said, stepping closer, lowering his voice. "But if I were you, I'd think real hard about that little brother of yours before I started making trouble." The words hit like ice water. Sadie felt fear move through her. Clean, sharp, real. But underneath it came something stronger. Anger. Not wild anger. Not reckless anger. The steady kind. The kind that stands up. Behind her, the library door opened. Evelyn stepped out first. Then Benji. Then, to Sadie's surprise, Deputy Lana Brooks climbed from a small sheriff's skiff tied farther down the dock. In one hand, she held a waterproof evidence bag. In the other, a radio. "I was wondering when you'd show up, Wade," Lana said. He turned fast. "What is this?" "It's the part where paper remembers," Evelyn said coldly. Lana walked up beside Sadie. "Miss Rowan called me before sunrise," she said. "And before you ask, yes, I've already sent copies of Miriam Vale's records to the state investigator's office in Baton Rouge." Wade's face changed then. The easy confidence cracked. He looked at the tin box in Sadie's arms and knew. He had lost control of the story. "You have no idea what you're doing," he snapped. Sadie met his eyes. "No," she said. "You counted on that. You counted on people like us staying scared." The dock had begun to fill. Flood survivors, neighbors, people in mud-stained boots and borrowed coats, people who had lost too much and were tired of being told it was bad luck. Lana took one step forward. "Wade Harlan," she said, voice clear and firm, "you are being detained pending a state fraud investigation." He looked around as if the town itself had betrayed him. Maybe it had. Maybe the town had just finally gotten tired of protecting the wrong people. By sunset, the workboat was gone. So was Wade. And the old floating library still rocked gently against the dock, battered but unbroken. Weeks later, after the water went down and the news trucks left, people came back with paint, lumber, blankets, and books. They patched windows, repaired shelves, hung a new sign, not because the town suddenly became perfect, but because, for once, the right story had survived. On a cool fall evening, Sadie stood on the deck and watched Benji inside at the reading rug, laughing with 2 younger kids over a stack of library books. The heater glowed. The lights were warm, and for the first time in a long, long while, she did not feel like she was only surviving. She felt rooted. Steady. Home. The river still moved past them. It always would. But now when Sadie looked at that water, she no longer saw only what it had taken. She saw what it had uncovered. The first reporters left after 2 days. The state investigators stayed longer. By the end of the week, Marlow had turned into the kind of town people talked about in low voices at gas stations and diner counters. Not because of the flood. Not anymore. Now people were talking about forged contracts, missing levy funds, sealed county records, and the old library boat that had somehow become the place where buried truth came back to breathe. Sadie should have felt relieved. In some ways, she did. Wade Harlan had been taken in for questioning. Copies of Miriam Vale's letters were now in the hands of people outside Marlow. Deputy Lana Brooks had kept her word. Evelyn no longer looked over her shoulder every time a truck slowed near the dock. And still, Sadie could not shake the feeling that they were standing in the middle of something unfinished. That feeling proved itself on a gray Thursday morning when a black SUV rolled into the parking lot above the river. Not local. Too clean. Too polished. A woman in a navy coat stepped out, carrying a leather folder and the kind of careful expression people wore when they came to deliver bad news without wanting to look like the villain. Sadie saw her through the boat window before the woman even reached the dock. Her stomach dropped. "What is it?" Benji asked from the reading rug. Sadie did not answer right away, because deep down she already knew. The woman introduced herself as Marissa Cole from Child and Family Services. Her voice was gentle. Her smile was professional. Her eyes moved through the boat, taking in the repaired shelves, the blankets folded neatly by the office, the canned food lined up in the galley, the stack of donated books near the wall. Then she looked back at Sadie. "You've done something remarkable here," Marissa said. "You really have." That was never a good sign. Sadie stood near the old circulation desk, one hand resting on the edge of it to keep herself steady. Benji had gone quiet behind her. "The county has concerns," Marissa continued. "You're 18. Your parents are deceased. There's no formal guardian arrangement in place, and your housing situation is still considered temporary under state review." Temporary. Sadie almost laughed at that. The word sounded so clean, so harmless, as if instability were just paperwork with a softer name. "I take care of him," Sadie said. "I can see that." "No," Sadie said, her voice firmer now. "I mean, I take care of him. Every day. I got him through the flood. I got him here. I got him fed. I kept him warm." Marissa nodded, but it was the kind of nod that came from policy, not agreement. "I'm not doubting your love for your brother, but love and legal custody are not the same thing." Those words landed harder than Wade's threats ever had. Because Wade had been easy to hate, this woman was calm, measured, sympathetic. And still, she had the power to take Benji away. By afternoon, the whole boat felt different, smaller, tenser. The river outside had turned quiet again, but inside, every sound carried too clearly. A spoon against a mug, a floorboard shifting, Benji turning pages too fast because he was trying not to cry. Evelyn found Sadie on the back deck just before sunset. Sadie was standing by the rail in her father's old flannel shirt, staring out at the muddy water with both arms folded tight across her chest. "I know that look," Evelyn said gently. Sadie did not turn around. "No, you don't." Evelyn stepped beside her anyway. "Yes," she said, "I do." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Sadie exhaled shakily. "I can fight county corruption, apparently," she said, her voice breaking around the edges. "But I can't fight a clipboard." That got the faintest smile out of Evelyn. Then the older woman's face softened. "Child, you do not have to prove you're perfect. You only have to prove you're not alone." Sadie finally looked at her. Evelyn went on. "This boat is not just yours anymore." That scared some people. But it also woke up others. Lana, the family staying here, folks bringing food and paint and time. The town is changing. Slowly. Messily. But it is changing. Sadie swallowed hard. "Ooh, what if they still take him?" Evelyn's answer came without hesitation. "Then we stand in the doorway and make them look all the way at what they're doing." That night, something shifted again. Not in the river, not in the weather, in the people. Just after dark, lights began appearing along the dock. First Lana, carrying files and a folding chair. Then Mr. Alvarez from the hardware store with plywood and a thermos of coffee. Then Miss Jo from the church with casseroles. Then two mothers from the south side with sleeping bags, school forms, and one very clear message. If the county wanted to question whether Benji belonged with Sadie, they were going to have to question all of them too. Inside the boat, the reading room filled slowly with warmth, voices, paperwork, and the stubborn heartbeat of a community deciding it was done abandoning its own. Sadie stood in the middle of it all, stunned. Benji slipped his hand into hers. "Are they here for us?" he asked softly. Sadie looked around at the crowded room, at Evelyn sorting documents, at Lana making calls, at neighbors setting down food like it was an offering, at the shelves, the blankets, the lights, the life this place had somehow grown. She squeezed Benji's hand. "Yeah," she whispered, "they are." But even then, with all that kindness around her, Sadie knew the hardest part had not come yet. Because showing people the truth was one thing, convincing the world to let her keep what she had built. By 9 the next morning, the old library boat was fuller than Sadie had ever seen it. Not with floodwater, not with fear, with people, real people. Neighbors in work boots, church ladies with casseroles wrapped in dish towels, a high school counselor carrying a folder thick with attendance records, report cards, and every form that proved Benji had been safe, clean, fed, and loved under Sadie's care. Deputy Lana Brooks stood near the circulation desk with a legal pad in one hand and that calm, unshakable look in her eyes. Evelyn sat straight-backed in the reading chair by the children's shelf, wearing her best navy cardigan like she was getting ready for war in a library. And right in the middle of it all stood Sadie, only 18, hair pulled back, shoulders tense, one hand wrapped around Benji's. The state caseworker, Marissa Cole, arrived just after 10. This time, she did not walk into an abandoned boat with a clipboard and quiet concern. She walked into a room that felt unmistakably alive. The heater was going. Coffee was brewing in the little galley. The windows had been patched. Fresh blankets were folded in clean stacks. Books had been sorted into baskets for younger kids and older readers. Someone had even hung a small hand-painted sign near the door. Marlow River Library and Safe Harbor. Marissa paused beneath it. Her expression changed just slightly. Not softer exactly, but more attentive. Like she was beginning to understand that this was no longer a temporary shelter held together by luck. This was a community. One by one, people spoke. Lana explained the ongoing fraud investigation and confirmed that Sadie had acted responsibly from the moment the flood displaced them. The school counselor testified that Sadie had kept Benji enrolled, clothed, and emotionally steady after both parents died. Miss Joe from the church talked about the meals, the supplies, the nights Sadie gave up her own share so the little ones would eat first. Mr. Alvarez from the hardware store described how Sadie had worked beside grown men, hauling lumber, patching walls, and never once asking for pity. Then Evelyn spoke. The room quieted before she even began. Her voice was not loud. It did not need to be. "This town failed a lot of people," she said. "It failed Miriam Vale. It failed the families on the south side. It failed this girl long before the river ever rose." She looked directly at Marissa. "But if you take that boy away from his sister now, after all she has done, then you will not be protecting a child. You will be repeating the same kind of failure with better paperwork." No one moved. No one interrupted. Sadie could feel Benji's fingers trembling in her hand. Then Marissa turned to Benji. "Do you feel safe here?" she asked gently. Benji looked up at Sadie first, then around the room, at the shelves, at the blankets, at the people, at the one-eyed stuffed dog tucked under his arm. Finally, he nodded. "Yes, ma'am," he said, "and I feel safe with her." That did it. You could feel it. Not like thunder, not dramatic. Just the quiet, unmistakable click of something falling into place. Marissa let out a slow breath and closed her folder. "Given the circumstances," she said, "I'm recommending emergency kinship guardianship remain with Miss Rowan while formal custody is reviewed. Effective immediately." Sadie did not cry right away. For a second, she just stood there stunned, like her body did not know what to do with relief that large. Then Benji threw both arms around her waist and buried his face against her. And that was when she broke. Not loudly, not all at once. Just one deep, shaking breath she had been holding for months, maybe for years. Outside, autumn came gently to Marlow. The floodwater pulled back. The mud dried. Investigators kept digging. More records surfaced. Wade Harlan was indicted. Miriam Vale's name was cleared and honored in a memorial by the river. And the old floating library, once left to rot in silence, became something the town no longer looked away from. By Thanksgiving, children were coming there after school. By Christmas, the reading room held coats, canned food, donated books, and a little tree in the corner with paper stars hanging from the branches. And on a cold evening in early December, Sadie stood on the back deck with a mug of cocoa warming her hands while golden light spilled through the windows behind her. Inside, Benji was laughing over a stack of dog-eared chapter books. Evelyn was teaching two little girls how to shelve novels. Lana was fixing a loose hinge near the office door. It was not the life Sadie had planned. It was not the family she had lost. But it was real, hard-won, tender, steady, and for the first time in a very long while, it belonged to her. Sometimes the world takes everything so fast you do not even have time to say goodbye. But every now and then, if you keep going, if you hold on, if you choose love when fear would be easier, life gives you something back. Not the same life, but a new one. And sometimes that new life is built in the very place everyone else forgot. Have you ever gone through a season that felt like it would wash everything away, only to discover it was shaping you into someone stronger than you ever imagined? If this story moved you, let me know in the comments. And if you believe ordinary people can still build extraordinary hope, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for more stories that remind us what courage, love, and resilience really look like.